Life is often so busy, taking us here, there, seemingly everywhere. When you aren't able to make it to church, we hope you are fed and nourished by listening to the preaching of God's Word wherever you are at the moment. In the meantime, take care, and God bless.
Good morning. Welcome to worship to all of you. How good it is on a Sunday to touch base one-on-one with people as you arrive together in community together. Also, for those who are online, a word of welcome to you here as well this summer Sunday morning. Every once in a while, something happens in the world that necessitates a little shift or change of plan. And I'll get to my prepared material in a moment on the sermon topic of the point of forgiveness. But before I do that, I was jolted awake, so to speak. I was at my laptop already yesterday morning doing some things, but Dale Riley, who's in the sanctuary here tonight, texted me and said, "Prayers for Haiti." I went online, I went to my browser and looked to see that yet another earthquake had hit the country of Haiti overnight and in the hours of the morning on Saturday morning yesterday. So Dale was the first one who let me know that that had happened. And it once again plunged my own thinking and my own concerns into overdrive. As you know, CESA Support Missions here at St. Andrew has been a part of Haiti since the other earthquake, 2010, rallied the international community alongside of the Haitian people. That earthquake killed, they estimate, 250,000 people back in 2010. It was a 7.0 Richter scale earthquake in 2010. It was situated close to Port-au-Prince. This earthquake is not in as much of a populated area. It was a 7.2, however, a little stronger, but also a little deeper. We have heard from our friends in Haiti, and from what I can tell so far, the people that we know in Jacmel and in the tiny community of Pasquette overlooking the city of Jacmel, people are safe. It was felt, but people are safe and okay, as well as those who are in Port-au-Prince and in St. Marc, north of Port-au-Prince, where Carolage lives. But it was the kind of thing where, can it possibly get any worse? You know, Haiti just had the assassination of their president back in June. Moise was assassinated, throwing the country into the political turmoil, let alone the economic and social realities. And I'm hearing as well that the gangs that are controlling the roads are restricting some flow of resources and medical supplies and so forth to that area of the island that was so profoundly affected. So not only do we have Afghanistan on our minds, but also Haiti on our minds here today. Pastor Matthew will be leading us in the prayers of the people here today as we pray for Haiti and hope that God will find a way to bring hope back to people who continue to go through these profound sufferings. The only answer that I have is to pray and to trust that God works for the good in all things eventually. Eventually, God works for the good in all things. I trust in that with all my heart. That's the ministry of Jesus all the way through to the end of his life and through his resurrection. That hope is eternal with God. And so I pray for that for our friends in Haiti as we offer prayers here in a little bit. So, with that said, may I now return to my normal material? Are you going to transition with me here? Please transition with me here. In reading the passage that you heard from Pastor Matthew here just a moment ago, with Peter being called by Jesus to be the feeder of lambs and the tending of sheep and the feeding of the sheep, that calling of Peter, there's all kinds of backdrop to this particular passage from John 21. And I want to open that up and do a little Bible time with you here this morning. I'm going to tee it up first by simply saying this. What is Jesus doing here from the perspective of a board of directors that might be overseeing Jesus' ministry? Think of Jesus' ministry as like a business or a nonprofit or a 501c3. And Jesus is about the process of assembling around him people who are going to carry out the work of Jesus' ministry. And what is a board of directors going to say about this relationship that he has with Peter? Now, on the one hand, the Apostle Peter has been at Jesus' side from the very beginning. In each of the Gospels, Peter is one of the first disciples that's called. So Jesus makes him part of the community right away with his brother Andrew, James, and John. They're there in each of the four Gospels and are part of things so front and center, all the experiences, all the miracles, the transfiguration, the healing of people who are sick, the casting out of demons, and all this. It was like a tutorial. If Jesus is the leader of this organization, he is manufacturing then the absolute perfect succession plan here, as Peter is the one who is observing, experiencing, and seeing it all happen. It seems to be all working according to the way a company would plan a succession of a CEO. But then we come to John 18, which relates to John 21 in the gospel reading today. John 18 is the time when Jesus has been betrayed and he's been arrested, and Peter starts showing some different colors. So someone says to Peter at this stage of the Gospel of John after Jesus is arrested, "So aren't you one of the Galileans? Didn't I see you with Jesus?" And Peter says, "Oh, no, not me." Peter's warming his hands by the fire, and someone says, "You sound a lot like a Galilean when you talk. Didn't I see you with Jesus?" No, it wasn't me." And a third time, Jesus said, the same thing is said to Peter as well, a third time, and Peter says, No, I'm not part of anything that this is all about. I am not part of this at all. So that threefold denial that's part of each of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, is part of the story that precedes the one that you read, and we had read by Pastor Matthew, the calling. What is a board of directors supposed to think about if they are sitting around a boardroom table saying, okay, so Peter is the one who is known as the rock. He's the person into which Jesus has placed all this authority and hope for the future. What is a board of directors supposed to say when they find out that Peter is the one who denied that he was part of this thing altogether? Is he really part of this thing or is he not? You can't count on him under pressure, I guess. Are you sure you want him to be the leader of the church? He seems self-serving. He's not loyal, so forth and so on. A board of directors or an HR department would point out these things to Peter and to Jesus especially, who has anointed him as the leader. What makes us pause a bit into what that process of succession just very well may be. But Jesus, in John 21, then calls Peter. And it's very important and wonderful poetry here when Jesus says to Peter 3 times, "Feed my lambs, tend my sheep, feed my sheep," 3 times, that echoes the 3 denials that took place just a couple of chapters before in Peter's history and story with Jesus and the Jesus movement. That Jesus continues, that Jesus sees him as Peter, as the bearer of the church, and endorses him and makes him the leader of the church. So we know from the book of Acts that Peter indeed would become leader of the church in Jerusalem. We know that he would also become the first bishop of Rome as well. The big Roman Catholic cathedral in Rome is called St. Peter's, right? It's the big church that Peter went on and did that. But it is that circumstance here where Peter comes not necessarily as the perfect candidate, which makes us then think about what Jesus is all about when it comes to forgiveness and about engaging Not just the Peters of the day 3,000 years ago that we read about in so many books of the New Testament, but also how Jesus is teaching us and encouraging us and moving us into our own lives of faith and our own lives of service. Is it okay for us to not be perfect? Is it okay for us to be a little vulnerable? It is okay for us to make mistakes along the line. Is that okay in our life of work, in our role of being a husband or a wife or a son or a daughter? And then is it okay then to still be part of that work or still part of that family or still part of that church? It is indeed, of course, okay to be forgiven, isn't it? It's okay to be forgiven and continue to be part of that which we are a part. And it's the way that we live our lives. But there have been a few examples here over the past couple of weeks that have made me think a little bit more about what it means to forgive ourselves and to recognize who we are as vulnerable, but people who are forgiven. There was last Saturday, a week ago, there was an editorial written by a guest columnist in the New York Times. Her name was Zoe Rule. Now, Zoe, when she was 5 years old, she was on the ski slopes close to her house. The ski instructor who was doing the teaching of her said, "Slow down, girl," she writes in the column. And then she said in the column, she turned back to the instructor and she said, "But it feels so good, 5 years old, skiing her feet in the mountains of Colorado." Time would go on with this Zoe Rule, where she would become a competitive skier. And she joined the U.S. Telemark Ski Association, the competitive ski association in the country, and is part of this highly, highly competitive, fast racing that would eventually mean that she would enter into World Cup competitions. And in fact, when she was 16 years old, a little bit later, she won a World Cup event on her home slopes as one of these champion downhill women skiers of that day. That was when she was 16 years old in 2014. But it was taking its toll on her, taking its toll in big ways. And then finally it came to not only her physical health. When she had fallen and hurt her back, she suffered from several concussions, and she still has chronic pain in her back all the way up until now, today, and will for the rest of her life. The time came when she had petitioned the Telemark Ski Association to get out of a ski competition because she wasn't spending enough time in school. And whatever it was in her experience at that present time, when she heard the no from the organization and that she would have to give up her spot on the team, she quit skiing. And she was done. So she continued to write in her article, "I wish someone had gathered the courage to do what Simone Biles did when I was competing, because I sure didn't. What if there had been a Simone Biles a decade ago? And what would that have given me as I was struggling to figure out my future?" So for her, she wrote about how it was Zoe the skier. And if you take away the skier, it would be just Zoe, and she would be no longer special. Special in the eyes of her team, special in the eyes of the glory that she was getting in it, and she was not willing to give that up, and she didn't have a role model out there to say, you know, it's maybe not that important for me to be putting myself in danger each and every day to do this thing that now I no longer have passion for. Do you remember when Simone Biles made that announcement at the beginning of the Olympics? Do you remember how there was a bit of what are we supposed to do with that? How is this be? I mean, I heard phrases like, well, if she would have known that this was happening, maybe she could have had another person join the Olympic team instead of her. Or there goes her endorsements because she's no longer a champion. or stigma of mental health reared its ugly head again as we looked at this world champion gymnast who has how many gold medals? 10? And how our commentators everywhere were suddenly putting her into another category because she was failing to compete in these Tokyo Olympic Games. From my perspective, as we think about our life of faith and our ability to be vulnerable, our ability to be insecure, and even our ability to have some mental health issues going on. It was the twisties, for goodness sake, for a gymnast. You rise up into the air and you're flipping and turning, but then you lose sight of where you are and how you're going to land, and it can be catastrophic if you lose a sense of where you are. So back to Zoe Rule then. She wanted to have a role model that could have given her permission to say, it's just not right anymore. I'm not confident anymore. I'm not part of this anymore. But I think we find ourselves in a different place. And from my perspective with Simone Biles, she might have lost some endorsements, but she's gained my endorsement. You know what I mean? She's gained my endorsement. So if I think about this concept a little bit more about forgiving ourselves and about letting ourselves be forgiven and trusting that God is there with Peter and that God and Jesus is there with all of us and forgiving ourselves, I think a little bit more locally here with a very insightful conversation we staff had with a few moms and teachers here in our congregation who were talking about what it has meant to be moms and teachers over the past 18 months. Of course, what I'm talking about is a pandemic. And I'm talking about a life that was lived prior to the pandemic where we had all kinds of expectations, all kinds of things that we wanted to be about and do and be, and also what we wanted to impress upon our children, that they will be productive and functioning or excelling and achieving children as well. And then the pandemic happened, jobs continued, school was at home. A couple of quotes out of that meeting. Last year, I felt like I was 90% teacher, 10% parent. Trying to deal with all the work stuff, and 10% parent. Another phrase that also came out of the meeting was, I caught myself saying, this is good enough, when you would have never have heard me say such words before the pandemic. This is good enough. But I do believe there's wisdom as we turn the corner here in August and onto a new school year that's accumulated over the course of the year, when one can actually freely admit in a group of people that I was 90% teacher and 10% parent, which maybe we want to have it be the other way around in more normal lives. And how it's also okay, perhaps, just to be good enough these days. And not pushing so hard and so long and so far or so fast. So where do we go with this? With Jesus' ministry, with the welcoming of Peter, with the welcoming of a leader, but a welcoming a leader who had flaws. In the end, he was also self-interested, self-protecting, but he was part of the community. And he did great things. We go back to the story here of Peter and Jesus, I think, and we hold on to it fast in our achieving lives. That we accompany and we learn and we grow and we achieve. But there's not a person in this building here today who can't tell me that there wasn't ever a time when they needed to be forgiven. When they did something a little off, had a bad day, went home and just had to be quiet and lay down on the bed because of the circumstances that had happened that day that you wish you could have had over again. How many times does that happen in life? The older you get, perhaps the more balance we get in it. and we understand it to be part of the character that's developing within us, and for the sake of the work we do in living out our gifts, and living out our callings. But Jesus forgave Peter and said, come on board this team, all that you are. Because together we'll do things here, even with those idiosyncrasies that exist. You and me together. I think that's a good lesson for living. Being able to forgive ourselves. Trust that God's forgiveness is for us always. And to grow. And live and serve. So help us, God. Amen.
We hope you found this week's message helpful as you think about how you will live out your faith each day. If you would like to support the ministries at St. Andrew Lutheran Church, you can do so by having your credit card information available and then texting a gift to 952-260-9007.